From ignoring him in public to saying he's making excuses to mess with the fighter's head, here's what Sean O'Malley thinks of Aljamain Sterling. Let's get right into it. So the biggest names in the game were kicking it at UFC 290 in July 2023, including Sean O'Malley. Now get this, while he weaved his way through the crowd, he ran into none other than the bantamweight champ Aljamain Sterling. But here's where it gets spicy. You'd expect some interaction, right? Maybe a formal exchange, a wave, a smile. But nah, O'Malley straight up kept on walking, not even giving Sterling a second glance. They didn't even trade a single word, it was just outright radio silence. Yikes. Anyway, ESPN posted this video on Instagram and the fan base went wild. The comment section blew up, faster than you could say knockout. They were all giving their 2 cents on this frosty face-off. One fans took major swipes at O'Malley, with many claiming he was the most overrated fighter in the UFC. One fan was even bold enough to suggest that O'Malley didn't peep or confront Sterling because he was too scared to look at him. That's some serious shade. Now, adding to the mix, we've got Dylan Dennis, Conor McGregor's sparring partner and teammate. He threw some serious shade at O'Malley too, saying he's one guy I wouldn't want to be. Sheesh, huge deal. Get this, Sterling, sporting a record of 23-3 in MMA and 15-3 in UFC, is going head-to-head with O'Malley, who's rocking a record of 16-1 in MMA and 8-1 in UFC. This epic clash is set to light up the UFC 292 main event on August 19th at the TD Garden in Boston. It's a big deal because after O'Malley knocked out Petr Yan at UFC 280, he's been itching for a title shot against Sterling. This will be O'Malley's first shot at a UFC title ever. On top of that, it's no secret that Sterling and O'Malley have been throwing mad shade at each other. Like, it's borderline legendary how much these two just do not get along. Did you hear the kind of comments Sterling made about O'Malley after this fight was announced? The bantamweight champ doesn't consider O'Malley a worthy opponent. He doesn't even think Sean's a proven knockout artist. On his YouTube channel, Sterling said, O'Malley gets a flashy knockout in Dana White's Contender Series, gets hyped up, then knocks out a few guys who aren't even in UFC anymore, as if that's even a real fight. Man, he's calling out every single dude O'Malley's taken down, including Terrion Ware, Andre Sukumtad, Raulian Paiva, Thomas Almeida, and Chris Moutinho. He brought up O'Malley's only career setback, a TKO loss to Marlon Vera in August 2020, but he didn't let that stop him. He won his next 5 fights, including a super close win over former champ Petr Yan. But here's where Sterling got a bit salty. He thinks O'Malley should have staked his claim and declared his dominance. Instead, Sterling thinks O'Malley got knocked out by Cheeto after a few kicks and then somehow moved up to fight Pedro Munoz and Petr Yan. For some context, Sterling had to fight 14 UFC matches before he got his shot at gold, including victories over Jimmy Rivera, Munoz, and Corey Sandhagen. So when it comes to comparing records, Sterling thinks he's been through the ringer to get to the top. Sterling's verdict? We're just not the same. I've cut my teeth in this sport. What are we even talking about? I don't think Sean deserved the spot. Still, Sterling knows he's got a battle ahead of him. He told the Schmo that Sean is a game opponent. He's tall, rangy, hits hard, he's very accurate, but every time he's stepped up in competition, he's fumbled the bag a bit. Sterling believes he's proven and is curious to see how O'Malley performs against someone who can put him on his back. So here's the thing, Sterling's got this idea that O'Malley's fights have been hand-picked to make him look like a superstar, and he's blaming Dana White for it. People have been targeting Sean O'Malley for quite some time now. The shade's been thrown, with people accusing O'Malley of cozying up to Dana White for special treatment. During all this, Sterling had a bit of a fallout with Dana. The situation? Sterling wanted a few days to chill before he went toe-to-toe with O'Malley, but White wasn't down for that. He even came at Sterling in public. Sterling said people don't get how much he's put into this sport. He says that sometimes it can burn you out and mess with your head. After the fight with Henry, he had so much going on that he just wanted to chill and forget about fighting for a minute, but things took a turn, pulling the rug out from under him. Now, he's sick of the authorities doing this to him because it isn't the first time, so he's essentially fighting against his will. Sterling thinks that Dana White and Hunter Campbell would probably say they're not forcing him to do anything, but he said, come on, you kinda are. Let's call it like it is. Sterling's still dealing with injuries and feels like he's being manipulated into fighting without any recognition or gratitude. But hey, Here's some good news. Things between Sterling and Dana are looking up. It appears the two have buried the hatchet. How do I know? Well, you see, Dana White gifted Sterling a Lamborghini worth a whopping £652,000. Still, that doesn't mean it's rainbows and sunshine between this guy and O'Malley. One resolved beef doesn't just resolve the other. O'Malley is still coming at Sterling hard. Dude went all out, openly challenging Sterling like a threat, saying, "Sterling's got 4 months to prep. He should take 2 off, heal up, then train like a beast for 2 months. It ain't rocket science. Or is it?" He's talking to Sterling like he's Of course, Sterling isn't staying quiet. Sterling had a comeback ready for O'Malley. He hopped on Twitter and schooled Sean, reminding him it wasn't science they were dealing with, but math. According to Sterling, O'Malley might have forgotten the difference because maybe he didn't finish school or he's been too busy clouding his brain with drugs. Sterling then teased O'Malley about the big money he makes every time he gets to kick some butt in the ring. He also tossed in some heavy sarcasm, acting like he aspired to be just like O'Malley when he grew up. High all the time, talking slow, and taking down those top-ranked fighters who are still in UFC. According to Sterling, O'Malley was quite the badass and so incredibly awesome. Yikes! That stung. It seems Sterling doesn't even want to fight with his rival. In fact, the champ hinted that he was sorta forced into the showdown, despite an injury. O'Malley, on the other hand, seems a bit puzzled by Sterling's claims that he's in this fight against his will. He's like, "Dude, what's the problem? If you can't fight, just say so. They could make an interim belt, and we could get this on later." He figures Sterling might be worried about missing out on the sweet pay-per-view cash if O'Malley didn't win the interim belt. He also isn't buying any of Sterling's injury talk. During International Fight Week, he called out Sterling for using his injury as an excuse. Sterling had been wanting a break to recover after his win over Henry Cejudo, but Dana White wasn't having it. He wanted Sterling to square off with O'Malley at UFC 292.
Aljo's this whole press conference tonight. No, I don't think so. I don't know what Aljo's doing. Aljo will be in Boston versus O'Malley.
O'Malley is pretty upfront about his thoughts. Sterling was pretty vocal about his bicep injury before his last fight, according to O'Malley, but Sugar thinks it's all part of Sterling's game plan. He feels Sterling might use the injury as a fallback, but O'Malley's certain about one thing. He's expecting Sterling to show up and put up a real fight, because let's face it, the paycheck's good. O'Malley thinks Sterling sees him as a serious threat and will take the fight seriously. He's ready to face the best Sterling there is. So, there you have it, folks. From saying he's making excuses to mess with Sean's head, to ignoring him in public, that was what Sean O'Malley thinks of Aljamain Sterling.